Thank you very much. That was really, really interesting. I suppose at the outset I want to acknowledge the work of John Lonergan, because I think he has highlighted an awful lot of these things over the years, and I know I did some work with him in the past quite a number of years ago, but he continuously spoke about the prison population. And, you know, while there's really good things being done, I want to talk about that in a moment, but really there's an absolute failure of the education system when we see that 80% of the school population is made up of early school leavers, those who didn't see a place for them in the school setting, in the education setting. And that really has to be, you know, way beyond today. And I know it's beyond the scope of the conversation today, but it has to be the forefront of our education committee in how do we address that? How do we make it so that young kids of 13, 14 and 15 don't give up and feel that there's no place for them within the education system? And that is a fault of the system when we see such high numbers there. So we certainly need to make changes there. And then when we look at the mental health services and those who have been failed by the mental health services, who make up a significant number, again, as the studies have shown, my goodness me, you know, we need to be rescuing much earlier down and in the life cycle, and we must put our heads together to make sure that we do that. And I want to commend the work of the ETBs and the openness of the ETBs. I'm very familiar, my sons go to an ETB as well as secondary school, and the openness in addressing a lot of these things, and I think that needs to continue and it needs to be supported. And the makeup of the curriculum. Sometimes I see what the curriculum is made up of, and I think it's no wonder that people feel there isn't a place for them there. We really need to look at that and look at how it serves people. Not everybody learns the same way, and how we need to adjust our curriculum in a more timely way to be able to enable learners to learn in the environment that suits them. So I just want to ask you a couple of questions kind of around that. See, it says 4.6% of people in prison have literacy issues, but that's way far below, obviously, the national average. So what are the challenges around assessing what the literacy levels are there? And I note that one of the actions in the strategy was to complete a literacy and numeracy audit of the prison population. Has that been completed? And just related to that, what progress has been made in compiling the education statistics? And do we have any figures on enrolment in the education courses after release? But maybe we'll talk about after release in a minute, but maybe first just in terms of getting the statistics that we need.
In terms of the number of people who are presenting with literacy issues in our centres, we have noticed quite a lot of people still coming to us with those kind of issues. And it's very difficult, I think, to come up with a panacea right away, because the reasons why people are not able to read and write when they get to the end of compulsory education can be many and varied. There's no single cause. So assessing that can be quite a challenge. We did set out a number of years ago, pre-COVID, to set about, it was a request I made to have a repeat of the 2003 adult literacy survey in relation to prisoners, with Ket and Morgan. And unfortunately, we put out a tender in relation to people to do that, but we weren't successful in that. And then COVID came along, and I think it's something that we're going to pick up, because we're really just getting back on our feet in the education service. But it is something that I would dearly like to see repeated, and is to have another go at that.
I think just to say, I mean, certainly the approach, and I visit the schools very regularly, and the approach is like there's such a wide offering that everybody can see something for themselves. So there's a huge focus around art and, you know, music. And generally what happens is people will come to school because they have an interest in art or they have an interest in music. And I know our teachers are really skilled then in terms of using that as a hook, you know, to help people deal with the literacy issues, maybe taking people out for 15 minutes from a class to do literacy work. Lorraine, I'm sure, has lots of experience in Cork Prison in relation to that.
Yeah, and I'd just like to add that we are very much supported by Cork ETB and the ETB across Ireland in terms of CPD for teachers, in terms of how to provide appropriate literacy support to our students. We have a huge emphasis on adult basic education within our centre, and I suppose we place emphasis across the various subject departments in terms of integrating literacy across all subjects that students are engaging in, even the practical subjects. So there would be a significant emphasis continuously put on literacy and numeracy within our education units.
If I could just maybe comment, Deputy, just to pick up on your broader point, you know, people who come into custody are poor people, but they're not just poor economically. They're poor educationally, they're poor in terms of their health status, they're poor psychologically. And I suppose working with our colleagues in ETB and working with our colleagues in psychology and drug treatment, etc., what we're trying to do is build people up to get them to see a different pathway in life. But we are dealing with people who've either been failed by the education system or have failed in the education system. And education, as our colleagues have said, is a really good hook to get people involved through arts, through ceramics, and into that. We've had a significant number of really good success stories where we've had long-term prisoners who've come in, who've got that hook through psychology, through education, and have gone on to do third-level courses and masters, etc. I was here in March with the Director General at the Justice Committee, and one of the prisoners linked in from Loughlin House Open Centre and spoke really articulately about his experience of prison and education and looking at a different pathway.